Hey everyone. Before I tell you this story, I need to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or state in the comments. Are you at home, at work, taking a break? Let me know because what I'm about to share with you is something that happened right here in the United States, and it could happen to anyone. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every single word of this. The text message came through while I was in the middle of a presentation at work. My phone was on silent, but I saw it light up on the table beside my laptop. Congratulations on your sale. Closing completed today. I stared at the screen, confused. Sale? What sale? I hadn't sold anything. My heart started beating faster. That instinct you get when something is terribly, horribly wrong, but you don't yet know what it is. I'm Laura, by the way, Laura Bennett, 34 years old, marketing manager at a tech firm in Portland, Oregon. And up until that moment, I thought I had a pretty good handle on my life. I'd been married to Ryan for 6 years. We had a nice apartment downtown, decent careers, the kind of life that looked perfect from the outside. But as I learned that day, sometimes the worst betrayals come from the people who sleep in your bed at night. I tried to focus on my presentation, but my hands were shaking. As soon as I finished, I rushed out of the conference room and called the number from the text. It went to a realtor's voicemail. Karen somebody. I'd never heard of her. "Hi, this is Laura Bennett," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just got a text about a sale closing today, but I think there's been a mistake. Can you please call me back as soon as possible?" Then I did what any modern person does when they're confused and terrified. I started Googling. I searched my name plus property sale and real estate closing. Nothing came up at first. Then I tried a different search, my mother's address, the address of the house where I'd grown up, where my mother had lived until she passed away 6 months ago. The house that held every memory I had of her, of my grandmother, of 3 generations of women who'd built their lives within those walls. That's when I saw it, a listing, sold, stamped across the photos. Photos of my mother's house, the wraparound porch where I'd spent summers reading, the kitchen window where she'd always kept herbs growing, the bedroom where she'd taken her last breath while I held her hand. My mother's house had been sold, and I had no idea how or why or by whom. I called Ryan immediately. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. By the third call, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Finally, he answered. "Laura, I'm in a meeting. What's wrong?" "What's wrong? Is that I just found out my mother's house was sold today, and I have no idea what's going on. Did you know about this?" There was a pause, a long, terrible pause that told me everything I needed to know before he even spoke. "Laura, we need to talk about this when I get home." "No, we need to talk about this right now. Did you sell my mother's house?" Another pause. Then quietly, "Yes, but I can explain." I hung up. Just hung up on him, because if I'd stayed on that call one more second, I would have started screaming, and I was still in my office building with colleagues walking past. I grabbed my purse and coat and left, told my assistant I was sick. Wasn't lying. I felt like I was going to throw up. I drove to my mother's house, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The sold sign was up in the front yard, just like in the photos. Bold red letters across a white background, like a knife through my heart. I sat in my car across the street, staring at that house. The house where my grandmother Ruth had planted the rose bushes that still bloomed every June. Where my mother Betty had taught me to bake her secret recipe chocolate cake. Where I had hidden in the attic during storms as a kid, reading by flashlight while the rain pounded on the roof. This wasn't just property. This was my history, my heritage, the physical embodiment of 3 generations of love and memory and life. And Ryan had sold it, without asking me, without even telling me. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember the 20-minute trip through downtown Portland traffic. I only remember walking into our apartment and seeing Ryan sitting on the couch, his tie loosened, looking nervous. "Laura, listen," he started. "How could you?" The words came out quiet, which was somehow worse than if I'd yelled. How could you sell my mother's house without telling me? He stood up, hands raised like he was trying to calm a wild animal. It was the practical decision. That house was just sitting there, empty. The property taxes alone were bleeding us dry, and with the real estate market the way it is right now, I knew we could get a great price. Bleeding us dry? I interrupted. Ryan, I've been paying those property taxes from my savings. You haven't contributed a single dollar toward maintaining that house. Exactly my point, he said, and I saw a flash of irritation cross his face. Your savings, money we could be using for our future, for investments, for... That house is my future. My voice was rising now. That house is the only thing I have left of my mother, of my grandmother, of my entire family history. It's just a house, Laura, Ryan said. And those words, those 5 words, they changed everything. Just property. He'd reduced my entire heritage, everything my mother and grandmother had built, to just property, like it was a stock he was trading, like it meant nothing. Who bought it? I asked, my voice shaking. Ryan shifted uncomfortably. A developer. He's going to renovate and flip it. We got a really good price, Laura, way above market value. I put half the money in our joint account and half in my business investment fund. We're talking about enough money to finally buy our own house, something newer, something that's really ours. It was already ours, I yelled. It was my mother's house. It was supposed to stay in the family. How did you even... I stopped, a horrible realization dawning. Ryan, I said slowly, my heart pounding, how did you forge my signature? Ryan's face went through about 5 different expressions in 3 seconds. Surprise, then denial, then guilt, then defensiveness, and finally, anger. He chose to land on anger. I didn't forge anything, he snapped. You gave me power of attorney when your mom was sick, remember? You were so overwhelmed with work and the hospital visits, you said I could handle the estate paperwork. I had given him power of attorney, back when Mom was in hospice and I was trying to juggle work and spending every possible moment with her. Ryan had offered to help with the administrative stuff, bills, insurance claims, all the tedious paperwork that piles up when someone is dying. I'd been grateful. I'd signed the papers without really reading them because I trusted him, because he was my husband. That power of attorney was specifically for Mom's medical and financial affairs while she was alive. It ended the moment she died. You know that, Ryan. You have a business degree. You know exactly how power of attorney works. He ran his hand through his hair, that tell he had when he was trying to figure out how to spin something. Look, it's a gray area, the estate attorney said. What estate attorney? I never hired an estate attorney. I did, after your mom passed, to help settle the estate efficiently. You mean to help you steal my inheritance efficiently. Don't be dramatic, he said, and the dismissiveness in his tone made my blood boil. I didn't steal anything. We're married. What's yours is mine, what's mine is yours. That's how marriage works. That's not how Oregon law works, I shot back. Inherited property stays separate unless it's explicitly put into joint ownership, which I never did. That house was my separate property, and you know it. He was getting angrier now, his face flushing red. You know what? Fine. Yeah, I used the old power of attorney paperwork. I updated the dates because I knew if I asked you, you'd get all emotional and sentimental and refuse to sell. You'd let that house sit there for years, rotting, while we struggle to save for our own place. You forged legal documents, I said, still not quite able to believe what I was hearing. You committed fraud. Against me. Against my family. I made a smart business decision. That house was an asset that wasn't being utilized. Now it's liquid capital we can actually use. In 5 years, you'll thank me for this. I stared at my husband, this man I'd shared a bed with for 6 years, and realized I had no idea who he was. Or maybe I'd always known, and I'd just chosen not to see it. How much did you sell it for? I asked. He hesitated. That's not important. How much? $450,000. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The house was worth at least $600,000. That neighborhood has been gentrifying like crazy. You sold it for 75% of its value? The market's volatile right now. I had to move fast to get a buyer before prices dropped. Or you had to move fast before I found out what you were doing, I corrected. You sold my mother's house for less than it's worth, forged my signature, and now you're standing here acting like you did me a favor. I did do you a favor. His voice was rising now, too. That house was a constant reminder of your mother's death. Every time you drove by it, every time you talked about it, you got depressed. This way, you can move on. We can move on. We can use that money to build our future instead of being anchored to your past. My past is who I am, and I felt tears starting to burn in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall, not in front of him, not now. That house is where my grandmother taught my mother to cook, and where my mother taught me. It's where 3 generations of strong women lived and loved and built a family, and you sold it like it was a used car. Oh, spare me the melodrama, he said. It's bricks and wood, Laura. It doesn't have feelings. Your mother is gone. Keeping her house doesn't bring her back. And there it was again, that complete inability to understand that some things matter beyond their monetary value, that heritage and history and memory are worth more than any dollar amount, that by selling that house, he hadn't just betrayed me, he'd erased a piece of my family's legacy. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out. I want you out of this apartment, tonight. Ryan laughed, actually laughed. This is our apartment, Laura. Both our names are on the lease. You can't just kick me out. Then I'll leave, I said, already moving toward our bedroom to pack a bag. But I'm calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow morning, and then I'm calling the police to report fraud. That stopped him. You wouldn't. I turned to face him. Watch me. Laura, if you report this, it becomes public record. It'll affect my business, my reputation. Think about what you're doing. I am thinking, I said. I'm thinking about how my husband committed fraud. I'm thinking about how he sold my family's house without permission. I'm thinking about how he's standing here trying to manipulate me into staying quiet about it. Yeah, Ryan, I'm thinking real clearly right now. I went into our bedroom and started throwing clothes into a duffel bag. Ryan followed me, his tone shifting from angry to pleading. Baby, come on, don't be rash. Let's talk about this. We can work this out. There's nothing to work out, I said, not looking at him. You committed a crime against me, against my family. There's no coming back from this. It's not a crime, he insisted. It's a civil matter at worst, a misunderstanding about property rights. No prosecutor would touch this. I zipped up my bag and faced him. Then you have nothing to worry about, do you? His expression hardened. You're making a huge mistake. That money is already invested. Even if you somehow got a judge to nullify the sale, which you won't, it would take years of litigation, years of legal fees. The house will be renovated and sold again by then. You'd be fighting for nothing. Maybe, I said, heading toward the door, but at least I'll be fighting, which is more than you can say. You took the coward's way out, Ryan. You snuck around behind my back because you knew I'd never agree to this. Where are you going to go? He called after me. Anywhere but here. And I walked out the door. I ended up at Sophia's apartment. Sophia had been my best friend since college, and when I showed up at her door at 10 p.m. with a duffel bag and tears streaming down my face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside, poured me a glass of wine, and listened while I told her everything. He did what? Sophia's eyes got wider with every sentence. Laura, that's not just wrong, that's illegal. Like, go to prison illegal. I know, I said, taking a shaky sip of wine. But he seemed so confident that he'd get away with it, like he'd thought the whole thing through and decided the risk was worth it. Because he's an arrogant piece of... Sophia stopped herself. Sorry, not helpful right now. Okay, so what's the plan? You said you're calling a lawyer tomorrow? First thing, I confirmed. But I don't even know where to start. Do I need a real estate lawyer, a criminal lawyer, a divorce lawyer? All of the above, probably, Sophia said. But let's start with the estate lawyer your mom used. They'd know about the property transfer and inheritance laws, right? She was right. Mom's estate had been handled by Mr. Harrison, a man in his 60s who'd been my grandmother's lawyer, too. He'd helped with the will and probate. If anyone would know whether Ryan's sale was legitimate, it would be him. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying Ryan's words in my head. It's just property, you're being dramatic, in 5 years you'll thank me. Each phrase was like a little knife, cutting deeper every time I remembered it. But underneath the hurt, something else was growing. Anger. Cold, focused anger. Ryan had underestimated me. He'd thought I'd be too emotional, too devastated by grief to fight back. He'd thought he could manipulate me into accepting what he'd done. He was wrong. The next morning, I called Mr. Harrison's office the second they opened. His secretary said he was booked solid, but when I explained it was urgent and related to my mother's estate, she squeezed me in for a late afternoon appointment. I spent the day at work trying to focus, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept pulling up property records on my phone, looking at the closing documents that were now public record. The closing date was yesterday. The buyer was listed as Weber Development, LLC. Ryan's business partner's company. Of course, Ryan hadn't just sold my house to some random developer, he'd sold it to his own business partner, which meant the above-market value price he'd bragged about was probably a lie. They'd probably worked out some kind of deal, some way to split the profits once the house was renovated and resold. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. This was calculated, planned. Ryan had been working on this for weeks, maybe months, while he smiled at me over dinner and kissed me goodnight, while I was still grieving my mother. Mr. Harrison's office was in an old brick building in downtown Portland. I'd been there before, back when Mom was setting up her will. The waiting room smelled like old books and furniture polish, comforting in a way that made me want to cry. "Laura, come in," Mr. Harrison said, opening his office door. He was a tall man with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I was sorry to hear you needed to see me urgently. What's going on?" I sat down in the leather chair across from his desk and told him everything. About the text message, about discovering the sale, about Ryan's confession that he'd used the old power of attorney paperwork, about the forged signatures. Mr. Harrison's expression got darker with every sentence. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, just looking at me with a mixture of sympathy and something that looked like suppressed anger. "Laura, I need to tell you something, and you're going to want to sit down for this. Well, you're already sitting, but you understand what I mean." My heart started pounding. "What is it?" "Your mother came to see me about 3 months before she passed away," Mr. Harrison said. "She was concerned about your marriage. She didn't give me specifics, but she said she'd noticed things that worried her. The way Ryan talked about money, the way he looked at her house. She said she had a bad feeling." I felt cold all over. Mom never said anything to me. "She didn't want to worry you. She was already dying, and she said she didn't want to spend her last months causing conflict in your marriage, but she wanted to protect you. So she asked me to make some changes to how the house was deeded." "What kind of changes?" Mr. Harrison pulled a file from his desk drawer and opened it. "Your mother had the house put into a special kind of trust, a ladybird deed, it's called. It meant that while the house was officially deeded to you upon her death, the trust maintained certain protections. Specifically, any sale of the property would require both your signature and the trustee's signature to be valid." I leaned forward. "Who's the trustee?" "I am," Mr. Harrison said, "and I can guarantee you I never signed any documents authorizing the sale of that house." The room seemed to spin. "So the sale isn't legal?" "The sale is completely invalid," Mr. Harrison confirmed. "Ryan may have forged your signature, but there's no way he could have forged mine. I have specific protocols for signing property documents, witness requirements, notarization, the works. Which means that house is still legally yours, Laura. Ryan's entire scheme was built on a foundation he didn't even know was there." I felt like I couldn't breathe. "Can we fix this? Can we get the house back?" Not only can we fix it, Mr. Harrison said with a slight smile, but we can make sure everyone involved in this fraud faces appropriate consequences. Ryan, his business partner, the realtor who processed the sale without proper documentation. All of them. What do I need to do? First, we need to file an emergency motion to halt any renovation or resale of the property. Then we file a lawsuit to nullify the sale. Then, if you want to pursue criminal charges for fraud, I can refer you to an excellent criminal attorney. It's going to get messy, Laura. Ryan's not going to take this lying down. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my mother, dying in that house, taking the time to protect it, to protect me, even when she was in pain and scared and facing her own mortality. I thought about my grandmother, who'd bought that house with her own money back in 1968 when banks barely wanted to give mortgages to women. I thought about 3 generations of strong women who'd built something worth keeping. Yes, I said firmly, I'm prepared. Let's burn his whole world down. Mr. Harrison worked fast. By the end of that week, he'd filed an emergency motion with the county court, and we had a hearing scheduled. He'd also looped in a criminal attorney named Detective Morris, who specialized in real estate fraud. Ryan didn't know what was coming. He'd been calling and texting me nonstop, alternating between apologetic and angry. We need to talk about this like adults. You're being unreasonable. I'm your husband, not your enemy. Each message made me angrier because he still didn't get it. He still thought he could smooth talk his way out of this. The emergency hearing was on a Thursday morning. I took the day off work and met Mr. Harrison at the courthouse. He'd warned me that Ryan would likely be there with his own attorney, and I needed to be prepared to see him. I wasn't prepared. Not really. When Ryan walked into the courtroom with a slick-looking lawyer in an expensive suit, my hands started shaking. Sophia, who'd come with me for moral support, squeezed my hand. "You've got this," she whispered. "Your mom made sure you've got this." Judge Patricia Henderson entered, and we all stood. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an expression that said she didn't tolerate nonsense in her courtroom. "I've reviewed the emergency motion," Judge Henderson said, looking over her glasses at the assembled lawyers. "Mr. Harrison, you're alleging that your client's property was sold without proper legal authorization. Please explain." Mr. Harrison stood and laid out the facts clearly and concisely. The Ladybird deed, the trust requirements, the fact that he, as trustee, had never authorized the sale. He presented documentation, the original deed, the trust documents, his notarized statement that he'd never signed anything related to the sale. Ryan's attorney, a man named Preston Walsh, tried to argue that the trust was invalid, that the power of attorney Ryan had used superseded it, that this was all just a misunderstanding between spouses. Judge Henderson shut him down fast. "Mr. Walsh," Judge Henderson said, her voice ice cold, "your client used a power of attorney that expired upon Mrs. Bennett's death to sell property he didn't own and didn't have authorization to sell. That's not a misunderstanding, that's fraud. And from what I'm reading in these documents, he did so in partnership with his business associate, which suggests premeditation." Ryan's face went pale. I watched him lean over to whisper urgently to his lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Your Honor," Walsh tried again, "my client acted in what he believed were the best interests of his marriage and—" "His marriage?" Judge Henderson interrupted. "He committed fraud against his wife. I'm not sure how that serves their marriage." She looked at the documents again. "I'm granting the emergency motion. All activity on the property ceases immediately. No renovations, no resale, nothing. The original sale is hereby nullified, pending a full hearing. Mr. Ryan Bennett and Weber Development LLC are ordered to vacate the property immediately." Ryan shot to his feet. "Your Honor, we've already invested tens of thousands in renovation plans." "Sit down, Mr. Bennett," Judge Henderson shouted sharply. "You invested that money in property you had no legal right to. That's your problem, not mine. And I suggest you find yourself a better lawyer, because the way this is looking, you're going to need one. We're done here." The gavel came down, and it was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. Outside the courtroom, Ryan tried to approach me. Sophia stepped between us. "Don't even think about it," Sophia said. "Laura, please, can we just talk?" Ryan started. "My lawyer will be in touch," I said coldly, and walked away. My hands were still shaking, but now it was from adrenaline, not fear. "Did you see his face?" Sophia said as we walked to her car. "When the judge said the sale was nullified, I thought he was going to have a heart attack right there." I did see his face. I saw the moment he realized that his careful planning had meant nothing, that he'd underestimated my mother, underestimated the protections she'd put in place, underestimated me. But it wasn't over yet. Mr. Harrison had been clear about that. Ryan could still appeal, he could drag this out in court for months, and there was still the question of the money he'd already taken from the sale, $450,000 that was now spent or invested or hidden somewhere I couldn't touch it. The next day, Mr. Harrison called me with an update. Ryan's partner, Thomas Weber, is trying to sue for damages. He's claiming he purchased the property in good faith and shouldn't be penalized for Ryan's fraud. Can he do that? He can try, but it's not going to go anywhere. Weber is a real estate developer. He knows the due diligence process. He knows that a property sale requires proper documentation and clear title. The fact that he proceeded without verifying the trustee's signature, that's on him. So what happens now? Now we wait for the full hearing, which is scheduled for next month. In the meantime, I've referred the case to Detective Morris at the DA's office. They're opening a criminal investigation into the fraud. Laura, I want you to be prepared. This could get ugly. Ryan could face criminal charges, prison time even. I thought about that. 6 years ago, I would have been horrified at the thought of my husband going to prison. But 6 years ago, my husband wouldn't have sold my mother's house behind my back. He made his choices. He can live with the consequences. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into documenting everything. Every text message where Ryan had tried to convince me the sale was legitimate, every email discussing the property, every financial record showing where the money had gone. Mr. Harrison had assigned a paralegal to help me organize it all into a coherent timeline. What we discovered made my blood run cold. Ryan hadn't just sold the house. He'd been planning this for almost a year. We found emails between him and Weber going back to 6 months before my mother died, discussing future opportunities and undervalued properties. They'd been waiting for her to die so they could execute their plan. "They were vultures," Sophia said when I showed her the emails, "circling while your mom was still alive, just waiting." The criminal investigation moved faster than I expected. Detective Morris was thorough, interviewing the realtor who'd processed the sale, the title company, even the notary who'd stamped the forged documents. Each interview revealed more evidence of Ryan's fraud. The realtor, Karen, initially tried to claim ignorance. "I was just doing my job," she said. The seller presented what appeared to be valid documentation. But Detective Morris found her communications with Ryan, where she'd explicitly asked about getting the trustee's signature, and Ryan had told her not to worry about it, that it was handled. She'd proceeded anyway, cutting corners to get a quick commission. "She's facing charges too," Detective Morris told me during one of our meetings. "Negligence at minimum, possibly complicity in fraud. Real estate agents are supposed to verify documentation. She didn't do her job." A month after the initial hearing, Ryan finally broke his silence, not through lawyers, but directly. He showed up at my office. My assistant buzzed me. Laura, your husband is here. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's insisting he needs to see you." I felt my stomach drop. "Tell him I'm busy." I did. He says he'll wait. I looked at the clock. It was already 4 p.m. I could try to wait him out, but knowing Ryan, he'd sit there all night if he had to. Better to face him now, on my terms. "Send him in," I said, "but leave the door open." Ryan walked in looking terrible. He'd lost weight, his clothes hanging looser than they should have, dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed. This wasn't the polished, confident man I'd married. This was someone unraveling. "Laura, thank God," he said, closing the door behind him. "I said leave it open," I said firmly. He paused, then opened it again. "Right, sorry. Look, we need to talk, really talk, not through lawyers. I have nothing to say to you." "Then just listen," he said, sitting down in the chair across from my desk without being invited. "Please, 5 minutes." I crossed my arms and waited. "I screwed up, Ryan," he began. "I know that. I know I hurt you. But Laura, this has gotten completely out of control. The criminal investigation, the civil lawsuit, Weber threatening to sue me, my business falling apart. It's destroying my life." "You destroyed your own life," I said coldly, "when you committed fraud." "It wasn't supposed to be fraud." His voice rose. Then he caught himself and lowered it. "I thought I had the legal right. The power of attorney was legitimate when you signed it. I just extended it, used it a little longer than I should have." "You forged legal documents, Ryan. You didn't extend anything. You committed a crime." "Okay, fine. Yes, technically I committed a crime," he said, running his hair through his hair. "But it was for us, Laura, for our future. That house was just sitting there, and we were struggling to save for our own place. I saw an opportunity." "You saw my mother dying as an opportunity," I corrected. "You and Weber both. I've seen the emails, Ryan. The ones where you were discussing the property while she was still alive, while I was sitting by her bedside. You were planning how to profit from her death." His face flushed. "That's not fair. I cared about your mom." "Don't you dare," I said, my voice shaking with fury. "Don't you dare pretend you cared about her. If you cared, you would have respected her memory. You would have respected what that house meant to her, to me, to our family. But you didn't care. All you cared about was money." "I care about you," he said, and I saw tears in his eyes. Real or fake, I couldn't tell anymore. "I love you. I know I made a terrible mistake, but our marriage is worth fighting for. We can get through this." "Our marriage died the day you forged my signature." "Actually, no. It died before that. It died when you looked at my grief and saw dollar signs, when you dismissed my family's heritage as just property. Our marriage died, Ryan, and you killed it." "So what, you're just going to destroy me?" He was getting angry now, the mask slipping. "Ruin my reputation, send me to prison, take everything I've worked for?" "I'm not destroying you," I said calmly. "I'm holding you accountable. There's a difference. Laura, if I go to prison, I lose everything, my business, my career, any chance at a future. Is that really what you want?" "What I want," I said slowly, "is for you to understand that actions have consequences. You gambled that I'd be too weak, too grief-stricken, too in love with you to fight back. You lost that gamble. That's not my fault." Ryan stood up abruptly. "You know what? Fine. Go ahead with your righteous crusade. But just remember, you're destroying your husband, the man you promised to love for better or worse. And you promised to love and cherish me, to protect me, not defraud me. So spare me the lecture about marriage vows." He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. The last traces of the man I'd married disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "You're going to regret this," he said quietly. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. When you're 40 and alone and still clinging to that rotting house full of old memories, you'll realize you threw away your marriage over nothing. Get out," I said. "Laura, get out!" I yelled it this time, loud enough that my assistant and 2 coworkers appeared in the doorway. Ryan looked at them, then back at me. "This isn't over." "Yes," I said firmly. "It is." He left, and I sat down heavily in my chair, shaking. My assistant brought me water and asked if I needed anything. I shook my head, trying to steady my breathing. That night, I met with Mr. Harrison and Detective Morris. I told him about Ryan's visit, about his threats. "That was stupid of him," Detective Morris said. "Coming to your workplace, making veiled threats, that's not going to look good in court." "Do you think he's dangerous?" I asked. Detective Morris considered. "Desperate people do desperate things, but I don't think he's physically dangerous. Financially dangerous? Absolutely. We're watching his accounts closely. We think he's trying to move money offshore, hide assets before the civil judgment comes through." "Can he do that?" "He can try," Mr. Harrison said, "but we've already filed for a restraining order on his assets. The judge will likely freeze everything until this is resolved." "What about the full hearing?" I asked. "When is that?" 2 weeks, Mr. Harrison said. "And Laura, I need to prepare you. Ryan's new lawyer is good. Very good. He's going to try to paint this as a misunderstanding between spouses. Say you're vindictive because of the divorce. Try to get sympathy from the judge." "Will it work?" "Well, not if we present the evidence properly," Mr. Harrison said. "We have documentation of premeditation. We have the emails with Weber. We have the forged documents. We have your mother's foresight in creating the trust. The facts are on our side." "But," I prompted, hearing the unspoken caveat, "but juries and judges are unpredictable, especially in cases involving married couples. Some people have trouble seeing fraud when it's between spouses. They think it's just a civil matter, a marital dispute." "It's not a dispute," I said firmly. "It's a crime." "I know," Mr. Harrison said, "and we're going to prove it." The more we investigated, the worse it got. It turned out Ryan's business was already in trouble before he'd sold my mother's house. He owed money to investors, had made some bad deals, was hemorrhaging cash. The sale of my house wasn't about securing our future. It was about saving his failing business. Detective Morris explained during one of our meetings. He was using your inheritance as a life raft, and he was going to do it without you ever knowing. If you hadn't gotten that text from the realtor by accident, you might not have found out until months later. We found more evidence of his deception. Credit cards I didn't know about, maxed out. Loans against our apartment that he'd never told me about. A whole financial life he'd been hiding while presenting a successful facade to me and everyone else. "How did I not see this?" I asked Sophia one night over wine at her apartment. "How did I live with someone for 6 years and not know he was lying to me about everything?" "Because you trusted him," Sophia said gently. "Because you're not a suspicious person. Because you assumed your husband was being honest with you. That's not a flaw, Laura. That's being a good person. He's the one with the flaw." My therapist, Grace, said something similar. "You're blaming yourself for not catching a liar in his lies. But Laura, he was good at lying. He'd been practicing for years. This isn't on you." Still, I couldn't help replaying our entire marriage in my head, looking for signs I'd missed. Had he always been this way, or had something changed? The Ryan I'd fallen in love with in our 20s had been charming, ambitious, fun. He'd made me laugh. He'd seemed to genuinely care about my dreams and goals. When had that person disappeared? Or had he ever really existed at all? The week before the hearing, Mr. Harrison called with news. "We've had a development. Thomas Weber, Ryan's partner, is offering to testify against him." "What? Why?" "Because Weber's lawyer convinced him that he's going down too unless he cooperates. He's willing to provide evidence of Ryan's fraudulent intent in exchange for immunity from prosecution." "What kind of evidence?" "Emails, text messages, recorded conversations. Apparently, Weber was nervous about the whole scheme from the start and kept detailed records. He's willing to hand all of it over." I thought about that. On one hand, I wanted everyone involved in this fraud to face consequences. On the other hand, Weber's testimony could seal Ryan's fate. "Do it," I said. "Accept his cooperation." The evidence Weber provided was damning. Emails where Ryan explicitly acknowledged that the sale would be tricky legally, but that I was too emotional to make rational decisions. text messages where Ryan discussed forging the trustee's signature, a recording of a conversation where Ryan admitted he was taking a risk but that the payoff would be worth it. "This is everything we need," Mr. Harrison said, reviewing the documents. Ryan's own words proving premeditation, intent to defraud, knowledge that what he was doing was illegal. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what would happen. What if Ryan convinced the judge I was being vindictive? What if they dismissed the criminal charges? What if, somehow, he got away with it? But then I'd remember my mother's last words to me, sitting in that house, in the bedroom where she'd grown up, where her mother had died, where she was now dying. "This house has stories in its walls," she'd said, her voice weak but determined. "Your grandmother's stories, mine, yours. Don't let anyone take those stories away, Laura. Promise me." I'd promised, and I intended to keep that promise, no matter what it cost. The morning of the hearing, I put on my best suit, a navy blue one my mother had helped me pick out for a job interview years ago. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw her reflected there. The same determined expression she'd worn when she was fighting her illness, the same set to her jaw that my grandmother had in old photographs. 3 generations of strong women. I wasn't going to let them down. Sophia drove me to the courthouse. Mr. Harrison met us outside, looking confident but serious. "Remember, stay calm, answer questions directly and honestly. Don't let Ryan's lawyer provoke you into anger. The facts speak for themselves." The courtroom was more crowded than I expected. Ryan was there with his new lawyer, a woman named Sarah Mitchell who had a reputation for aggressive defense tactics. Weber was there too, looking uncomfortable. The realtor, Karen, was present with her own attorney. Even some reporters had shown up. Apparently, the case had gotten some local media attention. Judge Henderson entered, and we all stood. She looked over the assembled crowd with those sharp eyes. "This is a hearing to determine whether criminal charges should be filed in the matter of fraudulent property sale and forged documents. I've reviewed the preliminary evidence. Now I want to hear from the parties involved." The next 3 hours were brutal. Ryan's lawyer tried everything. She argued that the marriage was falling apart before the sale, implying I'd created the Ladybird deed myself after the fact. Mr. Harrison immediately produced my mother's lawyer's testimony and the dated documents, shutting that down. She argued that Ryan genuinely believed he had the authority to sell the property as my husband. Detective Morris presented the emails and texts where Ryan explicitly acknowledged the legal risks. She argued that I was seeking revenge, not justice, that I was a scorned woman trying to punish her husband for wanting a divorce. That's when I finally got to speak. "Your Honor," I said, standing up, "may I address the court?" Judge Henderson looked at me. "You may." I took a deep breath. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about my marriage falling apart. This is about the fact that my husband committed fraud. He forged legal documents, he sold property he had no right to sell, and he did it while I was grieving my mother, while I was vulnerable and trusting him to be my partner. I pulled out a folder I'd brought with me. This is my mother's diary from her last few months. She gave it to me before she died. In it, she talks about her concerns about my marriage, about how she'd noticed Ryan was more interested in the house's value than its history, about how she worried what would happen after she was gone. I looked at Ryan, who'd gone pale. She knew. She knew exactly what kind of person you were. That's why she set up the trust. That's why she protected the house, because she knew you'd try something like this. "Your Honor," Ryan's lawyer interjected, "this is hearsay. It's contemporaneous documentation of the deceased's state of mind and reasoning," Mr. Harrison countered. "It goes to establishing why the trust was created and whether there was reasonable cause for concern." "Your Honor," Henderson held her hand, "I'll allow it. Continue, Mrs. Bennett. My mother spent her last days worrying about me," I said, and I felt tears starting to fall, but I didn't wipe them away. "Worrying that her death would leave me vulnerable. She used what little strength she had left to protect our family's home, our heritage, our history, and she was right to do so, because the moment she died, my husband started plotting how to profit from it." I looked at the judge. This case isn't complicated. A man forged legal documents to sell property he didn't own in partnership with a business associate for personal financial gain. The fact that I'm his wife doesn't make it any less fraudulent. It makes it more despicable. Judge Henderson called a brief recess after my testimony. When we reconvened, she looked grimmer than before. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented," she said, "and I'm ready to make my preliminary ruling. But first, I have some questions for Mr. Bennett." Ryan's lawyer started to object, but Judge Henderson cut her off. "Your client has the right to remain silent, but I want to give him the opportunity to explain himself directly. Mr. Bennett, did you or did you not forge your wife's signature on property sale documents?" Ryan looked at his lawyer, who nodded reluctantly. He stood up. "Your Honor, I used the power of attorney that my wife had previously given me." "That expired," Judge Henderson interrupted. "The power of attorney your wife gave you was specifically limited to her mother's affairs during her lifetime. You're an educated man, Mr. Bennett. You have a business degree. You understand legal documents. So I'll ask again. Did you knowingly use an expired legal document to sell property you had no authority to sell?" I watched Ryan struggle. He wanted to lie. I could see it on his face. But with all the evidence already presented, the emails, the texts, Weber's testimony, lying would only make things worse. "Yes," he said finally, quietly. "And did you do so in partnership with Thomas Weber, planning to profit from the renovation and resale of the property?" Another pause. Then, "Yes." "And were you aware that the property required the trustee's signature to be legally sold?" Ryan's lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my client can't be expected to—" "Yes or no, Mr. Bennett," Judge Henderson said firmly. Ryan slumped in his chair. "Yes, I knew." The courtroom was silent. Even his lawyer looked shocked that he'd admitted it so plainly. "Then let me be clear, Mr. Bennett. This is not a marital dispute. This is not a misunderstanding. This is premeditated fraud. Mr. Bennett, I'm recommending that the district attorney file criminal charges against you for fraud, forgery, and theft. You'll remain free on bail until trial, but I'm freezing all your assets pending resolution of the civil claims against you." Ryan's face went white. His lawyer immediately started arguing about excessive punishment, about the impact on his business, about giving him a chance to make restitution. But Judge Henderson wasn't interested. Your client had a chance to do the right thing. Instead, he chose to commit fraud against his wife while she was grieving. The law doesn't care about your financial inconvenience, Mr. Bennett. It cares about justice. She turned to me. "Mrs. Bennett, the original property sale is hereby voided. The house is restored to your ownership. Mr. Weber and your husband are jointly liable for any damages you've incurred, legal fees, emotional distress, and any costs associated with undoing their fraudulent sale. Do you wish to pursue additional civil claims?" "Yes, Your Honor," Mr. Harrison said before I could answer. "We'll be filing a comprehensive lawsuit for damages." "Very well. We're adjourned." The gavel came down, and it felt like an earthquake. Ryan just sat there, staring at nothing. His lawyer was gathering papers, already looking like she wanted to be anywhere else. Weber had his head in his hands. And me? I felt lighter than I had in months. Not happy, exactly. This whole situation was too painful for happiness, but vindicated, validated, believed. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed us. Mr. Harrison handled them, while Sophia pulled me aside. "You did it. Your mom would be so proud." "We're not done yet," I reminded her. "There's still the criminal trial, the civil lawsuit. But the hard part's over," Sophia said. "You proved he committed fraud. Everything else is just details." She was right. The criminal trial wouldn't happen for months, but with Ryan's admission in court, it was more or less a foregone conclusion. His lawyer would probably try to negotiate a plea deal to avoid prison time, but the conviction was inevitable. That evening, I drove to my mother's house for the first time since the sale had been voided. The lockbox was gone from the door. The sold sign had been taken down. It was just a house again. My house. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on hardwood floors my grandmother had refinished by hand. In the kitchen, I could almost smell my mother's chocolate cake baking. In the living room, I could almost hear my grandmother's laugh. In the bedroom where they'd both died, surrounded by family, I could almost feel their presence. I kept my promise, I said out loud to the empty house. I protected it. I fought for it. For us. The house didn't answer, of course, but I felt something shift, like a weight lifting. This place had been threatened, nearly stolen, but it was safe now. It would remain in our family, holding our stories, preserving our history. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. It was from Ryan. You won. Happy now? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back. This was never about winning. It was about doing what was right. I blocked his number before he could respond. I didn't need to hear anything else he had to say. That chapter of my life was over. Over the next few weeks, things moved quickly. The district attorney filed formal charges against Ryan. Weber, true to his deal, testified before the grand jury. Ryan's business collapsed as investors fled and partners distanced themselves. The realtor, Karen, had her license suspended pending investigation. She tried to claim she was just following Ryan's instructions, but the evidence showed she was negligent at best, complicit at worst. I started the process of cleaning out my mother's house, deciding what to keep and what to let go. Sophia helped along with some other friends. We found boxes of photos, documents, memories spanning 3 generations. In the attic, we found something that made me cry. A letter from my grandmother to my mother, written when my mother was pregnant with me. This house is more than bricks and wood. It's our legacy. It's proof that we survived, that we thrived, that we built something lasting. Protect it, my darling. Pass it on. Let it be a foundation for your daughter and her daughters. I sat on the attic floor holding that letter and felt the full weight of what I almost lost. Ryan hadn't just tried to steal property. He'd tried to erase history, to turn something priceless into something profitable. But he'd failed. Thanks to my mother's foresight, my grandmother's legacy was safe. The civil lawsuit was filed 6 weeks after the criminal charges. Mr. Harrison and his team had put together a comprehensive case seeking damages not just for the fraudulent sale, but for emotional distress, legal fees, and punitive damages. We're asking for $3 million, Mr. Harrison told me during a strategy meeting. I nearly choked on my coffee. $3 million? The house is worth $600,000. The house is worth $600,000, he agreed, but Ryan's fraud caused you significant harm beyond the property value. You've suffered emotional distress. You've incurred massive legal fees. Your reputation has been affected. People at your workplace know about this. It's been in the news. And most importantly, punitive damages are meant to punish the wrongdoer and deter others from similar conduct. Ryan needs to understand that fraud has consequences. Ryan's new civil attorney, the 4th lawyer he'd hired, the others having quit when they realized how bad the case was, tried to argue that $3 million was excessive. They filed a motion to reduce the claim to reasonable damages. Judge Henderson, who was also handling the civil case, denied the motion. Mr. Bennett committed premeditated fraud against his wife. He exploited her grief, violated her trust, and attempted to steal her family's generational property. The emotional harm alone justifies significant damages, regardless of the property's market value. Ryan was hemorrhaging money. His business was gone. His assets were frozen. He'd had to move in with a friend because he couldn't afford rent. Every time I saw him at court hearings, he looked worse, thinner, more haggard, more desperate. Part of me felt bad, the part that had loved him once, that had built a life with him, that remembered the good times. But that part got smaller every time I remembered what he'd done. Every time I thought about how he'd plotted to steal my mother's house while pretending to comfort me in my grief. He's trying to claim bankruptcy, Detective Morris told me during one of our updates. His lawyer thinks it'll protect him from the civil judgment. Will it work? Not entirely. You can't discharge fraud judgments in bankruptcy. He'll still owe you, even if he has nothing to pay with. The trying date was set for 6 months out. In the meantime, the house sat empty. I couldn't bring myself to live there yet. Too many memories, too much emotional weight. But I visited regularly, maintaining it, making sure it was safe. One afternoon, while I was cleaning out the basement, I found something that changed everything. A box labeled legal documents, do not discard, in my grandmother's handwriting. Inside were deeds, titles, and property records going back to when my grandmother had first bought the house in 1968. But there was something else, too. Documents showing that my grandmother hadn't bought the house alone. She'd had a business partner, a woman named Dorothy Chen, who'd contributed half the purchase price. According to the paperwork, Dorothy had signed over her share of the property to my grandmother in 1975, with the provision, if the house was ever sold outside the family, Dorothy's heirs would receive a percentage of the sale price. I brought the documents to Mr. Harrison immediately. "This is interesting," he said, reviewing them. "Very interesting. Have you tried to locate Dorothy Chen or her heirs?" I hadn't, but Mr. Harrison's team did. Within a week, they'd found Dorothy's son, Andrew Chen, living in Seattle. He'd had no idea about his mother's investment in the house. Dorothy had died in 1980, and the paperwork had been lost in estate chaos. "What does this mean for my case?" I asked Mr. Harrison. "It means that Ryan's attempted sale wasn't just fraud against you, it was fraud against the Chen family too. They have a legal interest in the property. Andrew Chen could join our lawsuit as a co-plaintiff, which would strengthen our position significantly." Andrew Chen did join the lawsuit. He was a kind man in his 60s who'd known my grandmother when he was young. He and my mother were best friends, he told me when we met. They helped each other buy houses when banks wouldn't give loans to women or minorities. It was a different time. "Your mother helped make my family's legacy possible," I said. "If you want to claim your percentage of the property value, you have every right." Andrew shook his head. "My mother gave up her share voluntarily. She wanted your grandmother to have full ownership. I'm not here for money. I'm here because what Ryan did was wrong, and I want to help make it right." With Andrew on board, our case got even stronger. Ryan's lawyer tried to argue that the old partnership agreement was irrelevant, but Judge Henderson disagreed. The partnership agreement proves that this property has significant historical and emotional value beyond its market value. It demonstrates a pattern of women, particularly women of color, working together to build generational wealth in a time when the system was stacked against them. Mr. Bennett's attempt to liquidate this asset without proper authorization is even more egregious in this context. The preliminary hearings continued through the fall. Each one revealed more evidence of Ryan's misconduct. Credit card statements showing he'd been spending money on his girlfriend. Yes, he'd had a girlfriend the whole time, while claiming he was investing in our future. Bank records showing he'd withdrawn cash from our joint account to fund his failing business without telling me. Emails discussing how he'd handle me if I found out about the sale. Every revelation made me realize how little I'd really known the man I'd married. He'd been living a double life, and I'd been too trusting, too busy, too grief-stricken to notice. "Stop blaming yourself," Grace said during one of our sessions. "You're not responsible for his choices. You're not responsible for his lies. The only person responsible for Ryan's actions is Ryan." I knew it intellectually, but emotionally it was harder to accept. How had I been so blind? What did it say about me that I'd married someone capable of such betrayal? "It says you're human," Sophia said when I voiced these thoughts to her. It says you wanted to see the best in someone you loved. That's not a character flaw, Laura. That's called being a good person. Ryan's criminal trial began on a cold morning in January, almost a year after I'd first discovered what he'd done. I sat in the courtroom gallery, Sophia on one side and Andrew Chen on the other, watching as Ryan was led in wearing an ill-fitting suit. He looked like a stranger. The man I'd married had been confident, polished, always in control. This person was broken, defeated, barely holding himself together. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. The forged power of attorney, the emails showing premeditation, Weber's testimony about their conspiracy, the realtor's negligence. Every piece of evidence fit together like a puzzle, creating an undeniable picture of fraud. Ryan's defense attorney tried to argue diminished capacity, that Ryan had been under extreme financial stress, that he'd made bad decisions under pressure, that he'd never intended to harm me. Intent doesn't matter in fraud cases, the prosecutor countered. Mr. Bennett knowingly forged legal documents. He knowingly sold property he had no authority to sell. He knowingly conspired with a business partner to profit from this illegal sale. The law is clear. This is fraud. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witnesses testified, documents were entered into evidence. Expert witnesses discussed the legal requirements for property sales. Through it all, Ryan sat at the defense table, staring at nothing. On the day Ryan took the stand in his own defense, I almost didn't want to watch, but I forced myself to be there, to hear what he had to say. His lawyer asked the expected questions. Ryan answered robotically, sticking to the script they'd rehearsed. Yes, he'd made mistakes. Yes, he'd acted without proper authorization. But he'd done it for understandable reasons. He'd been under pressure. He'd meant no harm. Then the prosecutor stood up for cross-examination. Mr. Bennett, you claim you were under financial pressure. Is it true that your business was failing before you sold your wife's mother's house? Yes, Ryan admitted. And is it true that you'd already invested money from your joint accounts into your failing business without your wife's knowledge? Yes. And is it true that you had a girlfriend at the time whom you were also supporting financially? Ryan's face flushed. That's not relevant. Your Honor, the prosecutor said, it goes to establishing a pattern of financial deception. I'll allow it, the judge said. Yes, Ryan said quietly, I was seeing someone else. So you were using marital funds to support a girlfriend while lying to your wife about where the money was going. And when that wasn't enough, you decided to sell your wife's inheritance, property you had no legal right to sell, to cover your debts and continue funding your lifestyle. Is that accurate? That's a simplification. Yes or no, Mr. Bennett? Yes. The prosecutor paused, letting that admission hang in the air. And at any point during this process, did you consider that what you were doing was wrong? Ryan didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was barely audible. I thought I could fix everything. I thought if I could just get enough money, I could save the business and Laura would never have to know. So you planned to deceive her indefinitely. I planned to protect her from financial stress by stealing her inheritance. I didn't think of it as stealing. That's the problem, isn't it, Mr. Bennett? You didn't think of it as stealing because you felt entitled to your wife's property. You felt entitled to make decisions about her family's generational wealth without her input. You felt entitled to erase her mother's memory and her grandmother's legacy for your own financial gain. Objection, Ryan's lawyer said. Argumentative. Sustained. Move on, counselor. But the damage was done. The jury had heard Ryan essentially admit that he'd felt entitled to do whatever he wanted with my property, my inheritance, my family's history. The closing arguments were powerful. The prosecution painted Ryan as a manipulative fraudster who'd exploited his wife's grief for personal gain. The defense tried to paint him as a desperate man who'd made bad choices under pressure. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, their verdict was swift and unanimous. Guilty on all counts: fraud, forgery, theft by deception. Ryan's sentencing was scheduled a month later. I didn't attend that hearing. I'd seen enough of courtrooms, heard enough testimony. But Mr. Harrison called me with the results. 3 years in prison, plus 5 years probation, restitution, and community service. The judge didn't go easy on him. 3 years. It seemed like both too much and not enough. Too much because, despite everything, he'd once been my husband, and I didn't enjoy knowing he'd suffer. Not enough because of what he'd done, what he'd tried to take from me. "How do you feel?" Sophia asked me that night over dinner. "I'm relieved," I said honestly. "It's over, finally over. I can move on." "To what?" I thought about that. "I don't know yet, but whatever it is, it'll be mine, my choice, my future. Not built on lies or someone else's agenda. Mine." With the criminal trial over, I could finally focus on the civil lawsuit. Ryan had nothing left to give. His business was defunct, his assets depleted, his reputation destroyed. But the lawsuit wasn't really about money. It was about principle, about establishing, legally and publicly, that what he'd done was wrong and had consequences. The civil trial was shorter than the criminal one. Much of the same evidence was presented, but now we also had Ryan's criminal conviction to point to. His civil attorney, clearly exhausted by the whole ordeal, barely put up a fight. Judge Henderson ruled in our favor, awarding me and Andrew Chen $2.4 million in damages. Ryan would probably never be able to pay it. He'd be bankrupt the minute he got out of prison. But having the judgment on record mattered. "It's not about the money," I told reporters outside the courthouse. "It's about protecting generational wealth and family heritage. It's about making sure that people can't just steal from their spouses and get away with it." The case got some national attention. I was interviewed on a few podcasts about financial abuse in marriage, about protecting inherited property, about the importance of estate planning. I became an accidental advocate for people in similar situations. But mostly, I focused on healing. I started therapy intensively, working through the betrayal, the grief, the anger. I joined a support group for people who'd experienced financial abuse from intimate partners. I learned that my story wasn't unique. Lots of people had been stolen from by people they trusted. "The hardest part," a woman named Beth said during one support group meeting, "is trusting again. How do you open yourself up to someone new when the person you trusted most betrayed you?" I didn't have an answer to that. I wasn't ready to date, wasn't ready to think about romance or partnership. I was still learning how to trust myself again, how to trust my own judgment. In the spring, I made a decision. I was going to move into my mother's house. Not permanently, necessarily, but for a while. I needed to reclaim that space, to fill it with new memories that weren't tainted by Ryan's attempted theft. Sophia helped me move my stuff. We painted the bedroom, updated the kitchen, made small changes that honored the house's history while making it feel like mine. "Your mom would love what you've done with the place," Sophia said, looking around the updated kitchen. "I hope so," I said. I tried to keep the things she loved, the original cabinets, the tile backsplash she picked out, while making it functional for modern life. Living in the house was strange at first. I'd hear creaks and sounds and imagine they were my mother or my grandmother checking in on me. But gradually, it began to feel like home, my home, a place of peace rather than pain. I started a blog about my experience, writing about financial abuse, property rights, estate planning, and protecting inherited assets. It resonated with people. I got emails from readers sharing their own stories of betrayal, asking for advice, thanking me for speaking up. One email stood out. It was from a woman named Linda, whose husband had tried to sell her father's business without her knowledge. She'd read my blog and realized she could fight back. She'd hired a lawyer, stopped the sale, and filed for divorce. "Your story gave me courage," she wrote. "I was ready to just accept it, to believe him when he said I was being unreasonable. But you showed me that I had rights, that I could fight, that I could win. Thank you." Reading that email made everything worthwhile. The year of legal battles, the emotional pain, the public scrutiny, it mattered because it helped someone else. I also reconnected with Andrew Chen and learned more about our shared family's history. His mother Dorothy and my grandmother Ruth had been part of an informal network of women who helped each other buy property in the 1960s and 70s when banks wouldn't give them mortgages on their own. They called themselves the Property Sisters, Andrew told me, showing me old photos of the group. About 15 women total. They'd pool resources, co-sign loans, help each other with down payments. Your grandmother's house was one of the first properties they successfully acquired. I decided to honor that legacy. I reached out to the other families, the descendants of the Property Sisters, and proposed an idea. What if we created a foundation to help women and minorities buy property today? We could use donations and grants to provide down payment assistance, financial education, legal support. Everyone loved the idea. We called it the Property Sisters Foundation, and we launched it on what would have been my grandmother's 95th birthday. The ceremony was held at my house, with descendants of all the original Property Sisters attending. This is what they would have wanted, Andrew said in his speech. We built something together, and now we're carrying that forward. We're making sure that future generations have the same opportunities they fought so hard to secure. I thought about my mother, about how she'd protected this house even while dying, about how that protection had saved not just the house, but my entire future, about how one person's foresight could change everything. A year and a half after Ryan went to prison, I got a call from the correctional facility. He wanted to see me. He'd been asking for months, apparently, but the facility had a policy of not reaching out unless the inmate requested it in writing multiple times. You're under no obligation to visit, the counselor told me, but he's been insistent. He says he has something he needs to tell you. I didn't want to go. Why would I want to see the man who'd betrayed me so thoroughly? But curiosity went out. What could he possibly have to say after all this time? Sophia didn't think I should go. He's probably just trying to manipulate you again, she warned. Maybe he wants you to put money on his commissary account or write a letter to the parole board or something. Maybe, I agreed, but I need to know. I need to hear whatever he has to say so I can finally close this chapter completely. The prison was a 2-hour drive from Portland. I went on a Saturday morning, signing in at the visitor's desk, going through security, following a guard to a large room filled with tables where inmates could meet with visitors. Ryan was already sitting at a table when I arrived. He looked different, older, grayer, thinner. Prison had aged him a decade. "Laura," he said when I sat down, "thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I said honestly. "What do you want, Ryan?" He took a deep breath. "I need to apologize. A real apology, not the bullshit I said in court or during the trial. I need you to know that I understand what I did, how wrong it was, and how much I hurt you." I waited, not saying anything. I've been in therapy here, mandatory at first, but then I actually started engaging with it, and I realized how messed up my thinking was, how entitled I felt to your money, your property, your life, how I dismissed your grief and your family's history because I couldn't see past dollar signs. "Okay," I said, and I'm sorry, really, truly sorry. I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back that year of hell I put you through, but I want you to know that I see it now. I see how wrong I was. I see what I destroyed." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation, but all I saw was exhaustion and what looked like genuine remorse. "Is that why you asked me here? To apologize?" "Partly," Ryan said, "but also to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." He paused, gathering courage. "Your mother tried to warn you about me." My breath caught. "What?" "About 6 months before she died," Ryan said, looking down at his hands. "She called me, asked me to come see her at the house. You were at work. She sat me down and basically told me she knew I was having financial problems. She knew I was interested in the house for its value, not its history. She told me that if I ever tried to take advantage of you, especially after she was gone, there would be consequences. I felt tears starting to form. She never told me. She didn't want to worry you, Ryan said. She was dying, and she didn't want to spend her last months causing conflict between us. But she wanted me to know that she saw who I was, and she wanted me to know that she'd taken steps to protect you and the house. The Ladybird deed? Yeah, Ryan confirmed. She told me about it, warned me that trying to sell the house without proper authorization would backfire. I didn't believe her. I thought she was bluffing, trying to scare me straight. I thought once she was gone, I could do whatever I wanted, and you'd never know the difference. But she wasn't bluffing. No, Ryan said quietly. She wasn't. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she knew exactly what I'd try to do. Your mother was smarter than I ever gave her credit for. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, other inmates were talking with their visitors, children, parents, friends, normal conversations in an abnormal place. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, finally. Because you deserve to know, Ryan said. You deserve to know that your mother tried to protect you in every way she could. She tried to warn me off, and when that didn't work, she made sure you'd be legally protected. Your mother loved you so much, Laura, more than I ever appreciated when she was alive. I wiped my eyes. Yeah, she did. I also wanted to tell you that I'm not going to contest a divorce or the civil judgment or anything else. My lawyer keeps saying I should appeal, try to reduce the damages, but I'm not going to. You deserve everything you won, and more. Ryan, let me finish, he said. I destroyed our marriage. I destroyed my business. I destroyed my reputation and my freedom. But the worst thing I did was try to destroy your connection to your mother, to your history. That house wasn't just property. I knew that. Your mother told me that. You told me that. And I did it anyway because I was selfish and desperate and stupid. He looked at me directly for the first time since I'd sat down. I'm going to be in here for another 1.5 years, and every day I think about what I did to you. Every day I wish I could take it back, but I can't. So all I can do is tell you that I'm sorry, and I hope someday you can forgive me. Not for my sake, I don't deserve forgiveness, but for yours, so you can let go of the anger and move on completely. I thought about that, about forgiveness. I'd been angry for so long, and that anger had been necessary. It had fueled my fight, given me strength when I wanted to give up. But now, sitting across from this broken man in a prison visiting room, I realized I didn't need that anger anymore. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said honestly. Maybe someday. But what I can do is let go. I can stop carrying the weight of what you did. I can stop letting your betrayal define my life. Ryan nodded. That's more than I deserve. Yeah, I agreed. After the prison visit, something shifted inside me. Seeing Ryan broken and remorseful didn't make what he'd done okay, but it did help me let go of the last vestiges of anger I'd been carrying. I threw myself into the Property Sisters Foundation. We'd raised enough money to help 3 families buy homes in our first year. I personally worked with each family, helping them navigate the process, understand the legal protections they needed, avoid the pitfalls that could leave them vulnerable. One of the families was a single mother named Tracy, whose ex-husband had tried to claim half her inherited house, even though they divorced before her mother died. Sound familiar? I was able to connect her with lawyers who specialized in property rights, and we helped her keep her home. You saved my kid's future, Tracy told me at the property closing. This house is all we have, and you made sure we didn't lose it. That was what it was about. Not revenge on Ryan, not even justice really. It was about making sure other people didn't have to go through what I'd been through. It was about turning my pain into purpose. The house itself became a kind of community center. I started hosting workshops there, estate planning, property rights, financial literacy. I invited speakers from legal aid organizations, financial advisors, therapists who specialized in financial abuse. The living room where my grandmother used to entertain guests now hosted 40 people learning how to protect their assets. Your grandmother would be proud, Andrew Chen told me after one particularly successful workshop. She always said that house was meant to bring people together, to build community. You're honoring that in a way she never could have imagined. I also started dating again, slowly, carefully, with a lot of therapy and a lot of vetting. I joined some dating apps and was upfront about what I'd been through. If guys were scared off by the fact that my ex-husband was in prison for fraud against me, good. That was an excellent filter. I went on some bad dates, a lot of bad dates, but I also met some good people, men who respected my boundaries, who understood why I was cautious, who didn't try to rush me into anything. One of them, a man named David, yes, I had to get past the name similarity to Ryan, was a teacher who'd also been through a devastating divorce. We took things incredibly slow, coffee dates for 3 months before graduating to dinner. But he was patient, kind, and most importantly, he respected my independence. I don't want to be with someone who needs me to be happy, David said on our 5th or 6th date. I want to be with someone who's already happy on their own and wants to share that happiness with me. That resonated. I was happy on my own. I'd built a life I loved, a home, a career, a purpose. I didn't need a partner to complete me, but maybe, eventually, I'd want one to share it with. 2 years after the initial discovery of Ryan's fraud, I got an unexpected call. It was from the buyer who'd purchased my house in the fraudulent sale, Michael something. He'd sued Ryan and Weber for damages, claiming he'd been a victim of their fraud too, and had won a judgment. "It's not weird," Michael said when I answered, "but I wanted to call and apologize. I should have done more due diligence. I should have verified the paperwork more carefully. I'm a real estate investor. I should have known better." "It's not your fault," I said. "You trusted the professionals involved. The realtor, the title company, all of them should have caught the problems. Still, I was part of hurting you, even if it wasn't intentional, and I wanted you to know that I'm sorry." We talked for a while. Michael was actually a decent guy who'd been caught up in Ryan's scheme without realizing it. He'd lost a lot of money in the deal and had to fight his own legal battles to recover it. "The crazy thing is, your house is legendary now in real estate circles. Everyone knows the story, the woman whose mother protected her inheritance from beyond the grave. People use it as a cautionary tale about proper documentation and title verification." I had to laugh at that. My family's tragedy had become a teaching moment for real estate investors. My mother would have appreciated the irony. As year 3 approached, I started thinking about the future differently, not just year to year, but decade to decade. What did I want my life to look like in 10 years, 20? I decided I wanted to grow the foundation, expand it beyond just Portland to other cities. I wanted to buy more properties that could serve as community centers, places where people could learn and grow and build generational wealth. I wanted to write a book about my experience, maybe do a speaking tour. But most of all, I wanted to make sure that my mother's legacy and my grandmother's legacy lived on, not just in the physical house, but in the work we were doing to help others. I also decided it was time to date David exclusively. After 6 months of casual dating, I was ready to try something more serious. He was thrilled, though characteristically low-key about it. "I've been waiting for you to be ready," he said, "but I wasn't going to push. You needed to get there in your own time." And now I'm there, so let's see where this goes. Life was finally feeling normal again. Not the old normal, I'd never get that back, but a new normal, a better normal even, built on truth instead of lies, on my own strength instead of dependency, on purpose instead of just going through the motions. Ryan was released from prison after serving 2 years with good behavior. I only knew because his probation officer called me. Apparently, I was listed as a potential victim he might try to contact, so they had to notify me of his release. "He's required to stay at least 500 feet away from you and your property," the officer told me. "If he violates that, call us immediately." I didn't expect to hear from him. We'd had our closure in that prison visiting room. What more could there be to say? But 3 weeks after his release, I got a letter. Not from Ryan directly, that would violate his probation, but from his lawyer. Inside was a document I had to read 3 times to believe. Ryan was signing over all rights to any claim on the civil judgment. He was officially forgiving the debt. But more than that, he'd written a statement explaining why. I spent 2 years in prison thinking about what I'd done. Not just the fraud, but the years of deception before it, the entitlement, the dismissiveness, the way I treated Laura's grief and her family's heritage as inconveniences to my financial plans. I came to understand that I'd never really loved her the way a husband should. I'd loved what she could do for me, what she represented to my image, how her stability balanced my chaos. But I'd never loved her for who she actually was, a strong, principled woman with deep roots and deeper values. I took those things and tried to monetize them. I tried to turn her history into my profit. There's no amount of money that can make that right. So I'm doing the only thing I can do. I'm letting go. I'm officially releasing any claim to her, her property, her life. She deserves to move forward without any shadow of me hanging over her future. There was more, but that was the heart of it. Ryan had finally truly understood what he'd done, and he was taking responsibility in the only way he had left. I sat in my kitchen, my grandmother's kitchen, my mother's kitchen, now my kitchen, and cried. Not from sadness, but from relief, from closure, from the knowledge that this chapter was finally, definitively over. But the universe wasn't done with surprises. A week after receiving Ryan's letter, Mr. Harrison called me with news that would change everything. "Laura, I need you to sit down for this," he said. "I'm already sitting," I said, alarmed by his tone. "I've been going through some old files from your grandmother's estate," Mr. Harrison said. "Files that were in storage, things I'd never looked at closely because they predated even your mother's involvement with my firm. And I found something extraordinary." "What?" "Your grandmother didn't just own this one house. She and the property sisters bought 4 other properties in the 1970s, small apartment buildings, a duplex, a commercial space. They used complicated trust structures to protect them from creditors and ex-husbands and all the ways women were financially vulnerable back then. Over the years, most of the property sisters sold out their shares to pursue other investments. But your grandmother, she kept her shares. And when she died, those shares passed to your mother. And when your mother died, they passed to you." I couldn't breathe. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you don't just own your grandmother's house," Mr. Harrison said. "You own approximately 40% of a $5 million property portfolio. Laura, you're a millionaire. You've been a millionaire since your mother died. You just didn't know it." The room spun. $5 million, 40%. $2 million in property holdings I'd never known existed. "Why didn't my mother tell me?" I managed to ask. "I don't think she knew," Mr. Harrison said. "Your grandmother handled all of this through a different attorney, someone who died in the 1990s. The properties were managed by a property management company that sent checks directly to a trust account. Your grandmother lived modestly. She never touched most of the rental income. It just accumulated. When she died, the trust became part of your mother's estate, but it was buried in paperwork, filed under the Property Sisters LLC name. Your mother was so sick, I don't think she ever looked through all the documents carefully, and I certainly didn't. I was focused on the house and the immediate estate issues." "So all this time," I said slowly, "while Ryan was trying to steal my inheritance to cover his debts, there was another inheritance worth 10 times as much that he never even knew about?" "Exactly," Mr. Harrison said. "Your grandmother's foresight protected not just the house, but wealth he couldn't have imagined existed. Even if he'd succeeded in selling the house, he would have missed the real treasure. Your grandmother made sure that only family would ever know about this portfolio. She protected it in layers, Laura, layers upon layers." I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The irony was too perfect. Ryan had committed fraud, gone to prison, destroyed his life, all for $450,000 from the house sale. And the whole time there was $2 million in property holdings he never even suspected existed. "Does Ryan know?" I asked. "No," Mr. Harrison said, "and he never needs to. This is your family's secret, Laura, your grandmother's legacy. She built something extraordinary and made sure it would stay in the family no matter what. I thought about my grandmother Ruth, buying property when banks barely wanted to deal with women. I thought about her and Dorothy Chen and all the property sisters, pooling resources and building wealth in a system designed to exclude them. They'd won, completely, thoroughly won. Not just protected what they'd built, but hidden it so well that even someone actively trying to steal it had never found it. That evening, I called Andrew Chen and told him everything. He laughed so hard he snorted. My mother would have loved this. Those women were geniuses, absolute geniuses. They built a financial fortress and disguised it as nothing. What do I do with it? $2 million in property holdings, I asked. What do you want to do with it? I thought about that. About my mother, my grandmother, the property sisters, all the work we'd done through the foundation. About Tracy and her kids, about all the families struggling to hold on to their homes, to build their own legacies. I want to expand the foundation, use the rental income to fund it, buy more properties, help more families, turn their legacy into something even bigger. Perfect. That's exactly what they would have wanted. 3 months later, we held a ceremony at my house. David was there, along with Sophia, Andrew Chen, and representatives from all the property sisters' families. We announced the expansion of the foundation, funded by the rental income from properties our mothers and grandmothers had purchased decades ago. They built in secret, I said in my speech. They protected in layers. They made sure that wealth would stay in families, would help communities, would survive attempts to steal or diminish it. And now we're taking what they built and using it to help others build their own legacies. After the ceremony, I stood on the porch of my grandmother's house and looked out at the neighborhood. This street, this house, this legacy, it had almost been stolen from me. But my mother's foresight and my grandmother's planning had protected it, and now I got to honor them by protecting others. Ryan had tried to reduce our family's history to just property, but property wasn't just bricks and wood and market value. Property was power. Property was generational wealth. Property was the ability to say no to people who try to control you. Property was freedom. My grandmother had understood that. My mother had understood that. And now, finally, I understood it too. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the house, the porch, the yard where my grandmother had planted roses 60 years ago. I posted it to the foundation's social media with a simple caption. This house is more than property. It's proof that when women protect each other, plan ahead, and refuse to be diminished, they build things that last for generations. This is my grandmother's legacy. This is my mother's protection. This is my future. And no one, no husband, no fraud, no scheme can ever take it away. The post went viral. Within days, it had hundreds of thousands of shares. Women sent me messages about their own family properties, their own battles against husbands and developers and systems designed to take what was theirs. The foundation's donation page crashed from traffic. And somewhere in a small apartment where he was trying to rebuild his life, Ryan probably saw that post, probably realized that the just property he tried to steal was actually worth millions, probably understood, finally and completely, what he'd lost when he'd betrayed me. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I'd built something new from the ashes of what he tried to destroy, something better, something that would last long after both of us were gone. I was free. The house was safe. The legacy continued. And that, finally, was justice. So that's my story. The story of how my husband tried to steal my family's heritage and how my mother, even from beyond the grave, protected me from his betrayal. If you're watching this, I want you to know something important. Protect your inheritance. Protect your property. Don't assume that marriage means someone has the right to your family's wealth. Get things in writing. Use trusts. Talk to estate attorneys. Learn from my mother's foresight and my painful experience. And if you've experienced something similar, if someone you trusted betrayed you financially, if someone tried to take what was yours, know that you can fight back. You can win. You deserve justice. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss future stories. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear it, anyone dealing with financial abuse, anyone protecting family property, anyone who needs to know they're not alone. And drop a comment below. Tell me, what would you have done in my situation? Have you ever dealt with financial betrayal? What's your family's story of protecting generational wealth? I read every comment, and I want to build a community where we support each other through these challenges. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, your heritage is worth fighting for. Never let anyone tell you it's just property. Until next time, stay strong, protect what's yours, and never stop fighting for justice.